Hey, welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be carrying on with the paint. We're going to be doing the wheels. So with that, let's get started. One thing to note is that at the end of this video, I am going to go on a little bit of a story time rant, but I will make it clear where the tutorial ends and where the rant begins. So if you want to listen to my rant, you can simply cut out the video at the end. So we're starting off in the primary vehicle. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to turn the wheel ID into its own function because we do need it for the configuration of the wheel colors. So we're just gonna go over here by the set wheels function, then here by the does if game exist, gonna select from there all the way to the target wheel ID, right click, and then we're gonna collapse this to a function. And then we're gonna call this load wheel ID. And then we're gonna take this and actually delete it, and then select the break, hide unconnected. Then we're going to open up the load wheel ID. So then from here, we're just going to take this, just drag this out a bit. Actually, I've got the, where are we at now? Set wheels, we actually do need this part here by the as BPGI game, all the way up to the break. So Control C this, head back to the wheel, Control V, and then select that, and then scroll down until we get to the wheel save. And then just connect this into the does if game exist, and then the load game from slot. Select the main node here. By the inputs, you can remove all of these, and then also by the return node, you can remove that, unselect the false, remove the return node, and then from the wheel ID, drag off and then promote this to a variable, and then connect the execution bin, and then just move this out the way, tidy it up a bit, and then just hide unconnected. Okay, so now that we have that, we're gonna compile, head over to the event graph, and then we just gotta drop this in here by the configuration custom event. So after the load vehicle ID, we're gonna drag in the load wheel ID, and then just connect this. Then we're gonna head back to the set wheels, because we need to connect the execution pin back up. And then we're gonna take the wheel ID and then drop that on the get, and then that will be it. And then we're gonna go to the functions, create new function, and then this is gonna be configure wheel color. And then in here, we're gonna do the same thing as we did with the configure body color. So we can open this up, and then we can take pretty much everything here, just select everything, Control C, head back to configure wheels, Control V, and then we just gotta make a couple changes, connect the execution pin, and then by the break, remove this. Actually, no, bring that back, select that. Then what we need is the BPS wheels, drag off from there, and then get a reference. Then we're gonna put the wheel ID, and then we need to change the set vector parameter value. So for me, this is going to be the tint. So it's the same as with the body color. So on the material, if I just head back to my materials real quick, vehicle, and then the VG1. So here I have the M underscore metal painted. So open up this one. So as you can see here under the base color section, we have the tint, which controls the color of the wheel. Just cancel that. So I'll be using the tint. And then from the get, we're gonna drag off and then break. Then we're gonna take the wheel color and then pop that in where the body color once was. Select the first break, and then hide unconnected. So now we have that. And then we have to change because you're not looking for the mesh anymore. So delete the mesh. And then we're gonna drag in the RL wheel, hold control, drag it in. Then we're gonna connect this up instead, like such. And then for the material slot name, for me it is the outer. So this would be the material slot assigned to the part of the wheel that you want to customize. So now with that, we have done one of the wheels, because we need to do each wheel individually because each one is its own static mesh. So right here after you configure wheel color, hold S, then left click to add a sequence node, and then just connect that to bin 1. Then we're going to repeat this for every wheel. So just select everything, just here by the break, hit and connect it, select everything, and then Control D, and then connect that to the then 1, then add 2 more pins to the sequence node for the other 2 wheels. And then we're going to replace the RL with the RR, and then Control V. Then you want to do the FL, then Control V one last time, and then the FR. And then just make sure to connect the execution pins to the sequence node, head back to the event graph, and then after the set wheels, drag in the configure wheel color. Then that is it for the primary vehicle. Compile and save. Then we're going to head to the wheels widget, and then since we have it set up from the paint, just going to head to the event graph, and then over here we're going to have to do the exact same thing as we did for the primary vehicle. But first we need to go to the load slider vehicles, slider values, open that up, and then we need to change where we're getting the information from. So by the break, we need to look for the BPS wheels. From there, drag off and then get a reference, create a new function, and this is going to be load wheel ID. So instead of doing this again, I'm going to head to the primary vehicle, open up the load wheel ID, and then just copy everything except for the variable itself. Control C, back to the wheels widget, Control V, and then just swap this out for the vehicle ID if it has grayed out. And then from the wheel ID, drag off and then promote this to a variable, connect the execution pin, connect the other execution pin, and then compile, head up to event graph, drag in the newly created function just before the load slider values, connect the execution pin, and when head back to the load slider values, drag in the vehicle, the wheel ID, not the vehicle, the wheel ID onto the get. From the get, drag off and then break, and then we only need the wheel color, so you can disconnect it from the body color over here. You can disconnect all the other noodles, select the break, hide and connect it, take the wheel color, connect that into the in color by the RGB to HSV, select the break, hide and connect it, and then we're just going to take these extra pins, drag them forward, and then connect this to the S and the V, and then take these, drag them out the way, and then just situate it as such. Just move that over there. You want to compile and save, and we're going to head over to the event graph, and then here we need to do the same thing like we did in the primary vehicle. So we're actually going to drag all this out the way a bit, and then we're going to take the back, select this, and then drag this down quite a bit, and then from the as BP tutorial target, not looking for the mesh anymore, I'm going to drag off, and then we're going to get RL wheel all the way to the bottom, and the get RL wheel. You want to drag off and then get RL wheel, scroll all the way to the bottom, and then drag off again, get FR wheel, and then the last one, get FL wheel. So now that we have all the wheels, we can now connect it to the get material index. Remember to make sure to change the slot, the material slot name to the one that's going to target the part of the wheel that you are going to be changing, and then drag that also to the get material. And then we're going to take the set body color and then rename this to wheel color, and then also by the set Select the perimeter value. Remember also to change the perimeter name to the one that's gonna be targeting the wheel. And then also by the create dynamic material instance, remember to connect that also to the wheel. And then we can remove the saturation and brightness sliders. Remove those two. Also remove the variables. Oh no, we still need those for the slide. No, we don't. So where are we still using those? Oh, down here by the back. So just remove them over here. And then we can, okay, we'll get to that in a moment. And then we have everything for the wheels. So we're gonna take this piece of code, Control D, just move it down a bit. And then we're gonna connect it to the second wheel. Just remember, connect all the noodles. And then connect the execution pin as well. Oh, we're gonna do the same thing like we did with in the parent vehicle, where we're gonna have a sequence. So just have a sequence node, and then connect all the sliders to the sequence. And then from the sequence, we will then connect that to the different wheels. So first one there, second one over there. Just drag all of this, drag it up a bit, just like somewhere here should be fine. You want to control D both of them, and then just drag these down like so. Connect the execution pins, and then connect the wheels. And then just double check and make sure that everything is correct. And then from here, going to take from the set, drag everything after that, and then just drag it out a bit more, and then remove the, oh no, don't remove the wheel color. I was about to say remove it because I thought it was still the body color. Just disconnect that. Then from the git, we're gonna drag off and then break. And then we are looking for the GPS wheels. So from there, drag off and then get a reference. And then from the git, then we set the members and then drag in the wheel ID, drop that on the git, select the first break, and then hide unconnected. We can remove the set because now we're going to use this one. Then we're going to use the wheel color. So now the wheel color goes into there. Connect the execution pin, then just tidy this up a bit, drag this out a bit more, connect the execution pin. That should be it for the wheels. Just compile and then save. You can remove the saturation and brightness variables. I'm going to head over to the workshop. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add a second camera. So select the first one and then just hold Alt and then drag to get a second one. And then you can position this any way you want to. Just need to position it so that you can see the car's wheels properly. If I'm not mistaken, my car spawns in looking down from the screen, so I think something like this should be fine. Just drag it a bit more, so it's like somewhere here. I'll refine this a bit more later. And then on the wheels widget, we are going to add another part to the sequence. So add another part. Just drag this out a bit, connect that to the second one. And then we're gonna drag off and then get all access or class. Just connect that. The class we're looking for is the cameras, camera actor. I'm gonna drag off, then get a copy. Actually, no, we need to remove that. And then promote this to a variable. rename this to cameras. I'm going to add another one. Just hold control and move that one to a lower level. And then we're going to right click and then get player controller. And then from player controller, drag off and then set target or set view target with blend. This will then go into the bin 2. And then the new target, we're going to get that right in the cameras, drag off and then get a copy. And then we're going to set this to 1. And then set this the new target. Set the blend to 0.5. And then we're going to take this as well, just Control C that piece of code. And then by the back, after we add to viewport, I'm gonna paste this here and then connect that so that we can get back to the first camera. So I'm going to set this back to 0. I'm going to compile, save, and then go and see if this thing works. Just save all. Just going to go paint, wheels. Okay, so I'll change this later on. So let's up the saturation, up the brightness, and then change the color. The wheel colors are changing. Don't mind the little splotches there. That was a mistake when I was assigning the material. So we're gonna head back. It changes. The wheel material is there. Like the wheels, it loads in with the wheel color, saturation, and the brightness. So we're gonna close this and see if it does then, in fact, load in with the proper color. So close that again, play the level, and then it does in fact load in with the material color that we set for it. So we have tested that out. It works. The code is fine. And then that brings us to the end of the tutorial. And now I'm going to start with my rant. So if you don't want to hear my rant, you can close out the video now and until the next one. So during the process of coming up with the code for the paint, because if you've seen the first tutorial, then you would know that the first iteration of how to change the color of the cars was through a color wheel. And I didn't want to go through that because that was a lot of code. So I want to find a way to make it simpler using the sliders, much like most games do that are mainstream. And then while coming up with the code, I ran into a problem with the sliders, particularly the saturation and the brightness, where they didn't want to load in with the actual values that they were changed to be. So much like what you saw in the video, where it would be at 53 when you set it up and you come back, it's supposed to be at 53, but it wasn't at 53. It would just default back to whatever was set in the widget. So if I set to 1, it would always default to 1. During the process, the thing that I came up with was the tone and shade variables in the blueprint structure, which resolved the problem, right? The tone, those extra variables made it so that the tone and shade did then load in properly without any issues. And then while working on the wheels, I didn't actually work on the wheels. I just said, okay, I'm done with the paint. I have the code, and then the wheels, I just kind of sorted them so I can figure out how to do it for the separate wheels because they were all distinct static meshes. So once I got that done, I was like, okay, cool, done, does it works, gonna move on. But not too long ago, while I came back to the original project file that had the code in it, I kind of looked at the code because I was playing Need for Speed Heat again, and then something there when I was busy customizing a car, that icon that you see at the bottom when it saves your progress, when I was busy painting the car, and I closed the widget and I realized that it doesn't save it every time you make a change. Instead, it saves it when you leave the widget. So at that point, I thought to myself, what does my code do? So when I came back and I saw like my code actually changes, or it saves the changes every single time you make a change. So every time you make that little step, that little 256 to 257, that 53 to 54, that 27 to 28. It was set up so that it saved your progress every time you made it. So I thought, okay, instead of doing that, what if I just saved it when you click on the back button? Okay, cool. Then I tried it, and then it worked. Okay, that was fine. I thought, okay, that worked because I did it on the paint, so nothing actually changed for me. But then after doing the paint, I was like, okay, let me go check on the wheels and go see what it's like on that side. So when I went back to the wheels, and then, like I said, for the wheels, I didn't put the extra variables, the tone and the shade in the blueprint structure. So I was like, okay, cool, let me just move this and then just set them up the same way. And then it worked like what you saw now in the tutorial, where it saves the values for the shaders, not for the shaders, for the sliders. So the slider values were changed. So when I realized this, I thought to myself, I changed the code, or I wanted to change the code from the color picker in the previous tutorial to the slider for convenience. But then I ended up creating two additional variables because the initial problem wasn't that it wasn't loading in the saturation value from the HSV to RGB. The problem was most likely that I was saving the changes as they were being made instead of saving it at the end when the player left the widget. So now I'm just sitting here kind of kicking myself, being like, why didn't I think of that when I was making the initial project file? But then again, it's something you don't really think about in the moment. Usually you have a problem and then you try and find a solution. And then once you found a solution, you kind of just drop it. You're like, okay, cool. I'm not gonna temper with this code anymore because now it works and getting the results that I want, so I'm not gonna look at it. But then as you kind of gain more experience with, developing your game or working on side projects, things like that, you kind of get these random clues, or in my case, when I was specifically into speed, and I just thought, okay, let me try that. It might be a little bit more, performance friendly, but instead of saving your changes as you make them, only having to save them once would require less processing power. And then the actual solution presents itself in that moment. Yeah, that's pretty much just my rant. The fact that I ended up creating two extra variables when I should have just moved the saving from with every change and just to when the player leaves the widget. That was pretty much my rant. Just one of those things that happen, I guess. You know, you live and you learn. You get better at things, so then you come up with different ideas for how to improve your code. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of my rant. For those who stayed and listened to me, thank you for that. And until the next video.